I just want to do a video on boundaries and defenselessness, a talk on relationship. The reason this topic's on my mind is because I've recently had some insights around defenselessness, which is another word for vulnerability, and what that really means for me in my experience. And you'll probably see throughout this slideshow, like a lot of the ideas around defenselessness that I talk about are a little bit underdeveloped because I'm learning. But maybe this is partly part of my process of integrating this, but yeah, let's see how this goes. So, I want to start in talking about boundaries, and I want to start about talking about boundaries and what can go wrong from like the non-dual or spiritual perspective for some people. Because this is what happened to me. Non-dual philosophy is likely unhelpful for those who can't hold or maintain a boundary already. Um, so, see if any of these types of statements resonate with you or something that you've heard before and maybe you even try to live by. And if you simultaneously take these on as a belief and notice you have trouble with boundaries, you're likely to have some issues because what'll happen is that when it comes time to set the boundary, you might rationalize not setting a boundary by telling yourself one of these things or sort of some permutation of one of these things. So you could add like we're all one to this as well, right? So for instance, someone's um, doing something that is really making you uncomfortable in a relationship. You feel like you need to have some distance, have some space. But instead of doing that, you make yourself a doormat by saying things like, there's no self to protect here, right? Well, I couldn't do anything about this anyway. There's no free will. I don't even exist. We're all one, right? I shouldn't even create separation by trying to set the boundary. Boundaries are just separation, man, right? So these types of ideas can help perpetuate the inability to set boundaries. Whoops. And yeah, basically what I just said. These statements can be taken on as a philosophy to avoid life, avoid people, avoid conflict, and avoid that discomfort of setting boundaries. So this is not necessarily the fault of those non-dual teachers who talk about this stuff. Um, and I think there's maybe a discussion to be had about where this responsibility lies if people are going to talk about phrases like these, but not talk about the shadow sides of these phrases and how they could be misunderstood by the people listening to them. Anyway, this is what happened to me, and therefore it's definitely, in my opinion, a possibility worth addressing. And another term for this is non dual bypass or spiritual bypass. Defenselessness. So, defenselessness feels something like water off a duck's back. The words and actions of the other are not seen to be a threat. So, you'll notice right here that there's two different internal states that might be happening in reaction to the perception of the other. One is I feel threatened and I need to do something about that, i.e., set up some sort of boundary. Or I feel threatened or I don't feel threatened at all. It feels like what they're doing isn't hooking me, isn't feeling like it's affecting my internal state in such a way where I need to defend myself against them and make them change what they're doing or get space so that what they're doing doesn't affect me anymore, right? So yeah, this is different than seeing the person as a threat, but suppressing your reaction. So when I say defenselessness, again, I'm not talking about the inability to set a boundary, right? There's a distinction there between, seeing them as a threat, but deciding that you're not going to show that you're scared or angry. Instead, you're going to try to spiritualize that emotion away and be like, nah, man, we're all one, right? I'm not bothered by this. I'm just consciousness. This self and what's happening to this body is irrelevant. All of that, frankly, nonsense. In this situation, none of that applies to you. If you're seeing the other as a threat already, none of that stuff applies. You're feeling that the other is a threat. So that needs to be addressed in some way, whether that's addressing it through setting the boundary, by taking space, by clearly communicating what you're feeling inside, or if you have some other way of dealing with that. Maybe there's some type of inquiry practice that you do to handle the emotional thought matrices that are coming up for you, right? So, anyway, to just pretend like it's not happening is more avoidance. So yeah, in my experience thus far, um, defensiveness is more something that arises rather than something that you do or is actively attained by trying to get there. It seems more something that's really nice when it happens. But to try to be defenseless, uh, and again, maybe I'll learn more. There'll be more distinctions that come along later for me. But uh, to try to be defenseless could be more of that suppression, right? Oh, I'm supposed to be defenseless right now. I'm supposed to be able to be vulnerable with this person, but instead I'm having a different reaction. I'm scared, I'm angry, etc. So here's a skill: pre-manipulation communication. You'll see I credit Peter Ralston with the term. It's his, but it's something I've experienced in my relationship that when I do this, things tend to go more smoothly. And what I mean by this is it's communicating what is true for you to the best of your knowledge, to the best of your ability. And I mean, honestly, to the best of your ability, not to the point where it's going to, I'll get to that in a second, actually. But communicating what is true for you instead of trying to manipulate the other's reaction to do something um, in such a way that it's going to make the threat go away. So when we do this, we're not trying to make the threat stop. We're not trying to make the thing that the other person is doing that we don't like go away. Instead, we're just communicating what's actually happening for us. So, for instance, you're sad that your partner is upset with you. They're upset, they're angry, and you're sad about that. And you don't want them to be upset. So what do you do? Um, Something that you might do if we're not engaging in this skill of pre-manipulation communication. Something that you might do is say, "Hey, you should stop doing that." Or maybe you'll pout and you hope that if you pout, they'll see you as small and weak and feel really bad for you and stop being angry with you, right? A couple of examples. Um, or you might even say that you're sad, but do it in such a way that you're trying to get them to stop being angry, right? And that's not necessarily this either. So pre-manipulation communication, the way I see it, another way of talking about it is letting them inside of your mind and heart. Instead of holding up this wall between you and the other, it's like you're letting them in to see your inner world. And you're saying, hey, listen, I'm feeling really sad right now. I'm even scared, actually. I'm scared of the fact that you're angry with me. And it makes me want to get really small. And I hope that if I get small, that you'll stop what you're doing. I hope if I just, so part of it can be even revealing the the way that you're thinking of manipulating them, right? And I've experienced this a lot. It's like I'm thinking of manipulating my partner in a particular way, um, by having a certain reaction, maybe even considering doing that thing or noticing myself starting to do that. And part of this can be telling on yourself, being like, you know what, I'm noticing that I'm trying to manipulate you in this way and trying to make you have a different reaction than the one you're having. And a lot of it too is the emotional communication. I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel hurt. And talking about the different layers that you're experiencing, all the way down to the deepest layer that you're able to get in contact with. I'm sad, and you know what? I'm actually scared. And I'm angry too. I'm starting to get angry because I'm scared, and I'm trying to protect myself from being hurt. So you might be talking about multiple layers. Um, and note that this is not a license to make your reactions the fault or burden of the other, which is another term for this that I put in here is weaponizing your honesty, right? So I did this for a lot of, I want to say a lot of years, but I did this for a long time, is took on this philosophy of everyone should be honest about everything all the time and use that as a way to put a burden on the other person, to maybe even tell them things that they don't want to know. And in those cases, I've found it easy to slip into, oh, they're doing something wrong by trying to avoid the full truth of what I have to say. And therefore, it's okay for me to put all this on them. So just a little point I wanted to make about honesty and how honesty, a philosophy about you need to be honest all the time and everyone should be honest, can be really aggressive and harmful to relationships. I just want to make that point. And again, this is my experience. I guess Brad Blanton maybe would disagree. I haven't read his whole book, but um, yeah, that's just what I've noticed. And also, I want to get back to this point up here about to the best of your knowledge. So I was really touching on that when talking about the different layers. So an example of that is, if you notice you're sad, and underneath it, actually, how about this? You're angry. This is a really clear example. You're angry, and underneath the anger is hurt. And you kind of are aware of the hurt. You kind of sense that hurt is there, but instead, what you do is you really focus on the anger. You don't touch on the hurt at all. And maybe even you lean into the anger and communicate really angrily. And it's like you're trying to frighten or threaten the other person into having a different, to taking a different course of action than what they're doing right now. So this isn't quite pre-manipulation communication, right? Because you're aware of the hurt, and yet you're trying to avoid the hurt. And this is all a bit abstract, right? We're talking really conceptually. This is divorced from a particular situation. But you can even make the argument that I think you can make the argument that getting angry at somebody like that, maybe that's never quite the right way to go with a partner. I don't know, unless they're really violating you, right, in some type of way physically, or um, won't allow you to take space. Maybe in that case, you have to be like, hey, stop, right? If it feels like they continue to encroach, and you're asking for space. This stuff really gets nuanced, and it all really comes down to the particular situation you're in and using your innate intuition and intelligence to navigate the situation. But hopefully, this is laid out enough of this that you really understand the gist of what I'm talking about. So I want to talk a little bit more about um, just my experience around this. The pain body, and I'm crediting Eckhart Tolle with this term, pain body, can be deceptive and will try to perpetuate more pain. So when I use the term pain body, I'm talking about this this part of us that it seems to almost feed on the drama that can show up in relationship, right? It actually wants to perpetuate our suffering. It's as if it's comfortable in dark, unconscious emotions. And instead of trying to bring that to light and honoring what's happening for you and what's happening for the other, and finding a bridge by which you can both meet and connect, it's it's trying to actively not do that. It's actually trying to just get the other person to change what they're doing so that you can avoid something. You can avoid a reaction from that you don't want. So the pain body can be deceptive and will try to perpetuate more pain. And part of how it'll do that, um, well, I guess it's going to be situation specific, but it's not going to look like pre-manipulation communication. It's going to look more something like, I pout and try to get them to change. I get angry at them and try to get them to change. I philosophize. Maybe I tell them about all the cool things that I'm learning about in this video, and tell them that their pain body is acting up, right? I tell them, hey, you're talking from your pain body right now, darling, and act intellectually superior instead of fucking meeting them where they're at. And I talk to that because I am guilty of that. I have to really catch myself on that because that's a tendency I have, is to like try to be superior and intellectualize the situation. Anyway, the pain body will try to perpetuate more pain. Respecting where I'm at and what I'm feeling and communicating that without making it the fault or the burden of the other, i.e., pre-manipulation communication, is generally effective and often the best I can do. And when I say the best I can do, I mean in that situation where I'm triggered and the emotion is up for me, it's not necessarily reasonable to expect myself to be transcendent or to be above or beyond where I'm actually at. Right now, I'm triggered and I'm angry or I'm sad or whatever emotion I'm feeling. And to try to put a standard on myself like I shouldn't be experiencing what I'm experiencing is another form of avoidance or bypass. Instead of trying to meet in the very human experience of having messy emotions and needing to connect despite of our defenses and our hurts and our triggers. So in these situations, generally the best I can do is to be honest about what's happening for me and try to share that and see if we can build a bridge. The ability to hold space for the other and not argue or manipulate, that is, to not get hooked by their pain body, is the most loving possibility that I personally know of. And this is defenselessness. I'm talking about defenselessness in a nutshell here. Um, they this is a situation where I'm not actually feeling triggered, but they are, and they're it's like the way that they're talking and the actions they're taking. It's almost like you can see the pain body at work, like it's trying to hook you in, it's trying to get into an argument, and instead you just find yourself continuing to gracefully navigate and love the other person, right? To not actually make them wrong for what they're doing. And I didn't put this in the slideshow, but I think a focus on needs might show up as well. As like they may be communicating something like this or that. Experience I had recently is I need you. Essentially, they were saying I need you to stop doing this thing, and it was something I really wanted to do. In my case, I'll just say it. It was taking a psychedelic substance, and I've found it helpful so far, and I want to keep doing it. But they're like, don't. I don't feel comfortable with you doing that. Essentially, what they're communicating is, I need you to stop. And I want to do it, and I feel it's within my right to do that. But instead of being hooked in and trying to defend myself and defend my ability to do that, I found myself focusing on, okay, but I'm not understanding the need. Like, if I do that, like, what's going to happen? Is there something you're afraid of? That, like, if I do that, then this will happen. Um, like, I just want to understand what that means for you if I do that and what you're worried will happen so that maybe I can address the underlying need here. So, in that way, I'm respecting myself and my own autonomy and not just being like, oh, okay, babe, you know what? I'll just do whatever you want. I'll just go against myself in order to try to please you and to try to make this reaction go away. So I'm respecting myself still, but at the same trying to understand the underlying need so that to see if maybe I can actually meet what's driving this. So, um, I mentioned this already in the slide. I wasn't expecting to bring it up earlier, but bringing up that they're talking from their pain body. Noticing my typo. Anyway, noticing that they are speaking from their pain body is likely manipulation on your end. You're likely trying to intellectualize and be better than them and avoid meeting them where they're at, avoid meeting their needs. You're not wanting to take responsibility for your partner. And that doesn't mean that all of their needs are your responsibility, but you may want to consider helping your partner out if you're in a partnership. I know I'm using the partner as an example here, but this because that's where I've really learned the most when it comes to this and experienced the most turmoil. Um, but this applies, I would think this would apply to a broad range of relationships. Also, withholding or making yourself small in lieu of arguing is still manipulating. So it's kind of what I talked about before in this example of I want to do something, she doesn't want me to do that, right? Um, and it feels to me as if giving that up isn't something I really want to do, and I feel like there's probably another way for us to meet in the middle and for me to meet her needs without me giving this thing up. So if I were in that situation to go, you know what, you're right, I'm sorry, I'm wrong, I don't want to fight, I won't do it again, right? Now I'm suppressing my own desires, and that's going to leak out in one way or another. Maybe it's going to turn into resentment, or I'm going to start hiding from her and doing it in secret, right? So just want to point that out as well, that making yourself small is also not the answer. And I'm out of slides. Cool. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any questions or want to chat about this, you can message me somewhere or leave a comment below. Cool. Thanks.